Combank Summit. Forward Together 2025. Creating a sustainable future.
Thank you very much for that lovely introduction. And setting the stage, Professor Kotagama set the stage with where we are right now. We definitely have to mend what we have, what went wrong. So in that process, I think our panel, as we were introduced, we have a set of panel who brings different perspectives from policy to research to industrial application. So taking on from Professor's part itself, like we are in the regenerative status, but also while implementing, we face such challenges. And this panel is who brings this expertise, who have tried, who have failed, who have found ways, and here they are to bring you such wealth of knowledge, and they are going to share such knowledge. So, as suggested, this panel discussion, initially we'll be having a discussion with the panelists, and then we'll be opening the floor to you all. So if you have any questions at any point, note them down and keep them ready. We'll be giving a chance to you all as well. So initially, I would like to start the session because to set the standard and to set initial, to apply this circularity, enabling this policy frameworks, or it completely depends on the regulations and the policy frameworks. So initially I want to direct my first question to Engineer Kumarasena. Sir, like in your opinion, how can national policy and regulatory framework can enforce the adaptation of circular economy principles across the various sectors?
Yeah. In fact, so if you look at all the countries, they go by top-down approach with the policy, then the regulation, and then the practice. Let's say when circular economy was implemented in EU, they came out with the circular economy declaration in 2015, and then they were working on various directives and processes going on. If you take countries in our region like Vietnam, they have adopted Circular Economy National Action Plan in last January. But where are we as Sri Lanka? So then, in number one, now in Sri Lanka, there's no dedicated circular economy policy or regulatory framework as such. But I don't think that's a big gap, because we have, we go by the concept sustainable consumption and production, so that we have national policy on SCP, in which circular economy is also mentioned. And in addition to that, but having a dedicated circular economy policy and action plan will be very much supportive to take it forward. Particularly what we have to look at is how we can integrate our economy with the global economy. So, for example, when we export to the European markets, industries are today thinking about what is going to happen with the EU Green Deal in next year. So then, are we ready within our economy? So therefore, that's why Vietnam go ahead in that way. So how we can arrange, prepare our industry, our exporters to meet those requirements. So in that case, however, in Sri Lanka, so circular economy has been included into different national action plans. So National Environmental Action Plan, as well as now government is going to submit the third nationally determined contributions, probably this month or next month. So then that also under the industry sector NDCs, circular economy has been included. So therefore some significance has been given there. But still, when we come to the export market, our products has to comply with, let's say, eco-design directives. Then how can we take the eco-design forward? Because that is one of the fundamental things if you are going for circular economy. Let's say resource circulation you cannot make without you design for it, design for circularity. Then of course, what can we promote in that way? Let's say, in that case, we can understand. Now we are still preparing our extended producer responsibility regulations by government. So that has to be expedited, and then it should be in place, which will support resource circulation. So likewise then, we have to admit that there should be some key areas to streamline in our policy and regulatory framework. But the most important thing, when you are developing that one, we have to look at our needs because we cannot be in isolation in our economy. So how to fabricate this one, integrate to the global economy, so that what are the tools and techniques required. For example, now LCA is very important today to go for the environmental product footprints requirements for the EU market. Then in promoting LCA, we need some infrastructure within the country which can be properly worked out if you have proper regulatory framework. So that's why now, having really understood our need of the economy, then we have to develop our circular economy policy framework.
Indeed, like we have included these circular economy frameworks in many aspects, but we have to incorporate them everything together, and how well we can meet the global markets. That's one of the important factor that we have to consider that. Thank you very much on that note, sir. And building on that policy framework, I think it's equally important to back this up with the technical knowledge as well. That's where the research comes in, because understanding the facts and understanding the technical approach. So I would like to direct the next question to Dr. Jayasinghe. Like you have been involving in many circularity and plastic recycling recirculation projects. So what are the research projects that are targeting the ground level applications and resource circulations that you have been involved in?
Thanks, Abhrami. So now I work for the University of New South Wales, Australia, as the plastic and waste specialist, but I'm not going to talk about the work that we do there. Before joining the university, for the last 8 years, I was with the Faculty of Technology, University of Sri Jayewardenepura. So all the work, the research, the experience that I'm going to share here is the work that we did at the university. So I'm telling you, the Sri Lankan university sector, we do tons of research in the circular economy area. I'm not going to name names, I'm not going to tell which university is doing what, but if you look at all the three different pillars in circular economy, designing out waste, keeping materials in use, and regenerating natural systems, the universities are doing lots of research. So if any of you are interested in doing work in any of these areas, you can reach out to any of the local universities. They are doing amazing work. So let me give you some examples. If you look at the three different principles, I see that most of the research being done in keeping materials in use and regenerating the natural systems. Not so much in the designing out waste space. We do, but because we are generating waste, and waste is a visual problem that we see, there are many research in the areas of how we can create better material recovery systems. In that also, we see lots of research in the plastic waste space. I feel that is because we have a good recycling market for metal and glass, and plastic is highlighted as a problem. When I say plastic, is anything that's in the polymer space, so even textile waste. We see a lot of research in that area. And then when we look at the regenerating natural systems, I think for many, many years, most of the research was done in this area. And this is very critical to the circular economy discussion. Because when we talk about the circularity, I really love that Sir highlighted that, not circularity, how we can go back to what the nature has been doing every day, just like as we speak. Regenerating natural systems, there have been many research on composting. Using organic waste to and transform that to compost. We have been doing that for many years, and I think that was one of the most reported research areas in the papers, in journal papers. And a few years ago, because of all the issues that we faced as a nation, this organic fertilizer again came into light, and there were another set of research around that area. Another new area that we see a lot in the circular economy space is biochar. I'm not going to go into detail because I'm not a biochar expert, but I see experts in the room, so you can go and speak to them. So biochar is another area, even from municipal solid waste. There are projects carried out by the University of Sri Jayewardenepura. I'm going to name my university because that's where I worked. Lots of research in that area. Now, let's come back to the second point, keeping materials in use. I mentioned that we do a lot of research in the recycling space, but we need more research in the repair, reuse, remanufacture space. How to reduce waste space. It's not only about recycling. Sometimes I hear this word, especially in the university setting, when we talk about circular economy, the kind of that idea that comes out is that it's about waste, it's about recycling. No, circular economy is much more than that. It's a collection of all these principles. So I think we need more research in that other R, repairs, reuse, remanufacturing in that space. Now I come to that last point, designing out waste, which is actually the first principle in circular economy. We don't see, or we didn't see much research in that area, designing out waste, because it's designing out. We have to think creatively. We have to think outside the box. How can we not create waste in the first place? How can we avoid? How can we prevent? Rather than creating a plastic material, if I take plastic as an example, how can we look at an alternative product that provides the same function? So that's the challenge. And I think we need more game changers, more people who can break the barriers and work in this designing out waste space. We see eco-design, we see modular furniture being developed by, from upcycled products, but in a very niche research space or research groups. We see a lot of research in the biodegradable packaging area with all the plastic HDP bag bans and all the other discussions around plastics. We see biodegradable research in biodegradable packaging, and that too, I can see that students are very much interested and the researchers are very much interested in creating new materials. How can we use cornstarch and create a bioplastic? Or how can we use something like a new material that can give the same plastic-like characteristics so that we can create a better bioplastic material? Let me tell you, our systems are not yet properly set to accept bioplastic materials because people still don't understand. They can't distinguish. If they look at the polythene bag, they see it as a plastic bag, and they will go and dispose it in the plastic recycling bin, contaminating the plastics that we can recycle. So we need more system changes as well. I mean, I am talking about material changes, but we need system changes. We need more research in the behavioral change aspects and what we can do to change the system in a more transformative way. So I think given the time, I captured all three in a nutshell.
Thank you very much, Dr. Andika. It's encouraging to see that many researchers, especially scalable researchers, are happening at the universities. And also, one of the key factors is designing out. I think there are opportunities for researchers. If you are a researcher out there, definitely take up, and I'm sure there will be more opportunities on that. And now, moving on with that, from research, let's shift to the industry perspective, because that is the actual practical thing that's happened. So Sri Lanka's apparel industry has a very strong impact and a reputation. And Mr. Gunaratna, I think a person who practices circularity, as well as you are implementing and you are actually in practice you are producing, I really want to know, what are the key challenges that you face, especially in adapting circularity in an operational perspective, and especially how do you balance these design goals with those the market demands that we have? So how do you balance those?
Thank you for the question. Hi everyone. So for us, especially at MAS, circularity is about keeping what's already extracted in use, right? Because we've already extracted much more than what we require. So I think also you're faced with, the real market realities. There's a demand and supply, pricing is an issue, and the product needs to, perform, right? You can't say it's sustainable and have an inferior product. So I think, the answer is also kind of in the question. You need a market that's willing to pay the right price, appreciate that product at the right quality, and for us, circularity is more textile to textile. So that's our goal. So if you look at it, right now we take textile, PET bottles, and we make textile. But you're taking a food-grade plastic and making clothes. So ideally, a bottle should go back to a bottle, and textile should go back to textile. And for us, that is what we are trying to achieve in circularity. We've done various investments in companies in Europe and in the US. EPR and the regulations in Europe are also coming, which will enable us to push this ahead. And at the end of the day, we're exporters to companies in Europe, US, and Asia. So for us, really, we need regulation in that part of the world to move much more faster and ahead for us to, keep up to standard. But at the end, like I said, price, product quality, performance of a product is as important as the sustainability credentials of it. You can't sell a product just because it's sustainable anymore. All of you would have gone to shops and seen there's a lot of sustainable product out there, and brands are now, with scale, being able to sell it at the right price and at the right quality. So that's the way we can scale circularity.
Indeed, right product at the right scale and right price. So that's pretty much true. And one key factor that I loved is textile to textile, going back to using the materials, and also textile to textile circularity and plastic to plastic circularity. That's one of the key factors that we always have to think of that will help us adopt this regenerative system. And continuing with the policy angle, I want to get back to the policy angle, because while having these frameworks and any directions, I think the regulations are the most important factors, because that will let us know whether we can adapt it, how soon we can adapt these systems. So I want to direct the question to Engineer Kumarasena sir, what role do you think regulations play in accelerating these transitions from linear to circular model, and especially in the developing country like us? So what is your opinion on that?
Well, We can look at the developed countries and other developing countries who are already implementing, and then we can learn the lessons. If you look at what is moving, mainly, let's say, under circular economy literature, we name it as the Kalundborg symbiosis, this eco-industrial park or waste exchange at the system level. So those eco-industrial park concept is moving very well. So then we have, in fact, eco-industrial parks are there in our region, countries in our region, but in Sri Lanka, so far we don't have it. But currently there is a project going on with the EU support to transform existing industrial parks into eco-industrial park. One of the key action is then the waste exchange line. So therefore those are some practices. Then when we come to those things, then in fact regulations also matters, but more than that then we need to have some sort of system approaches. Then another very important thing is the circular economy business models for the companies. So circular economy business models are of various types. Now circular subscription model, for example. I can remember when the first global forum on circular economy was happening in 2017 in Helsinki. They had organized some startup businesses to come and demonstrate around the conference so that visitors can go and talk to them. So one of them was, their business is, circular subscription for the cloth. That means they are renting out cloth in such a rich city in Helsinki. There are customers who are taking the cloth for rent, for the children and for the elders also. So then, can we bring that culture over here? So then, it cannot be done only with the regulations, but regulations also necessary to overcome certain barriers. Then in addition to that, then we see these eco-innovative business models. Eco-innovation has been practiced by European companies since 2000. Then of course, circular economy very well fitting to them because what they have, they are right now streamlining, so that regulations are coming on their way. So in Sri Lanka also, now eco-innovation was also promoted since 2013. So in various sectors it's going on. So therefore, your business model will be converted into more sustainable business model, economically, environmentally and socially. Of course then eco-innovation also right now it has been included into SCP policy and few other things. But there are some basic regulations, as I mentioned earlier, like EPR, etc., where these are running with regulation basis in the world. So those things can be mobilized with that. And I would like to mention now a lot of good things are happening in Sri Lanka. Now circular economy for the food sector project is going on with the EU support, as well as circular economy for the textile sector is going on with the support of Sweden, like that. But really speaking, now then through that process we understand some regulatory requirements to go ahead. Yeah. Thank you.
So indeed, there are some regulatory challenges, but still system changes and there are other business models which we can adapt and move ahead with the circular economy practices. But in case if we have a strong regulation, definitely these it will enhance and it will fasten the process as well. So now let me go back to the research perspective, and we are talking the bridge between the research and the impact that it has on the world. So many research projects are they show great promise and they show great outcome, but they sometimes face challenges in attracting the banking or rather scalable project or attract investments. So, Dr. Randhika, I would like to direct you, in your experience, what helps this academic research to translate into a investment-ready study or investment-ready research?
Thank you, Abdulrahmi. So let me first start with the challenges. Now, in my first set of points, I painted a very positive picture about the research in our university system. And it's very true. With the little resources and financial support that we have, our universities are doing amazing work. And we really need to appreciate that and acknowledge that. But now, for this question, let me be a little critical. Now, why do we do research? When I was at the university, if I take myself as an example, there are certain criteria, certain expectations that we do research, we publish them in good journals, and that, if we can, the research that we do in the STEM area, if it's possible, get a patent. These are the positive points of doing research for researchers. Now, all the research that I mentioned earlier, these are work that have been done in the universities, probably published in very high impact journals, got all the recognition for the researcher, the team. They even applied for the patents. I, myself, have 2 patents, but that's it. Sitting somewhere, probably, coloring our CVs in all the colorful ways that it's possible, but not creating the impact that it should be doing. And that's the problem that we have. Now, let's be critical about all the sectors, not just the academic sector, about the private sector, the banking sector, the government, about everyone. Because all these people, everyone, I think in the first session, someone mentioned, or it was mentioned a couple of times, that we are working in silos. No one is supporting each other in a way that it should be. You can say that, no, we are supporting, we work with the universities are difficult to work with, we go to the government is impossible. These are the words that we always hear. No, we need to find a middle path that we can work together and actually make our research work, because our work is really amazing. Let me take textile waste and MAS as an example, because we have worked with MAS and an amazing company to work with. I worked, one of my previous MPhil project was to find a solution or come up with a material for textile waste. And we collected textile waste from various different companies, and MAS was one company. And we developed a material, perfect, properties are perfect, we can put that into use in many different aspects. We did some improvements, we even have a patent for one of the materials. It's all good, it's there. Now, we would really like to take that to the next level and commercialize this. MAS, if I take that as an example, is a textile manufacturing company. They are not making side panels or roofing tiles. That's not their business. Okay? So for us, it's a university research, and we can't be going into doing the business as well. And now we need a third party, a company who would take up this idea and convert the materials into a commercial, a scalable product. And that's where we always find difficulties. It's not easy to sometimes purchase these equipment that we need to convert our lab scale materials into commercial products. And there, sometimes everyone is at a very difficult, challenging place. The banks, if you are here, or funding agencies, this is where you can actually support, work with us, with the universities, with the research centers, with the companies that's generating waste as part of their manufacturing, and new businesses that can convert these materials into products. So I think just one example that I wanted to highlight, how we can break those barriers. I know it's very easy for me to sit here and tell this, and it takes, we have to probably move mountains to achieve that, but we need to start having these discussions. So breaking those barriers, breaking those silos, and working together is really important. One other thing, the second point is actually, again, I made a point here. I think the assistant governor said, how can we translate this impact into financial language so that the banks and the financial institutions understand what we are talking? I'm going to go and tell them, I have a big circular economy project idea. I'm going to convert this material into a material that has all the flexural and tensile properties. That's not going to convince the bank. So we have to have that kind of the financial language that they understand and frame these ideas as in ROI terms. What is the return on investment for the private sector and for the banks? I had a point about incentives, but the governor said, don't talk about tax incentives now. But the policies, EPR, extended producer responsibility, we are giving some responsibility, or like the majority of the responsibility for the manufacturers to take the responsibility of the products that they introduce to the market. But the consumers have a bigger role to play as well to support those work. The third one is capacity and tools, like how we can support incubators. Banks, the private sector can play a bigger role in supporting or scaling up research-based innovations into startups or social enterprises. And my last point is that we definitely, been in the sector for a long, long time, and I can see my friends here from the waste sector, and they will all agree with me, we need to shift the narrative. Too often we use these terms, waste management, recycling, and this is not working anymore, especially in the circular economy discussions. We need to move beyond this waste management framing, present the resource circulation, the value addition that has in climate action, in resilience building and inclusive economic growth, and also in the gender equality space as well. So the discussion needs to continue, and to do that we also need data. The importance of data was highlighted many times, and I was so happy about that, because simply we cannot manage what we don't measure. Thank you.
Thank you very much for that comprehensive answer, and especially taking through all the challenges that you face as a researcher. And building up on that, those were the challenges faced by researchers, but at the same time, there'll be a different kind of financial challenges that are faced by private sector, especially industries, when scaling up or when adapting circularity business models. For example, we can talk about this take-back system or even implementing EPR within the system. So there are challenges, financial challenges that you face. So I would like to know what sort of challenges that you face while adapting these circular business models, Mr.
So I think it's two ways, right? If you look at what Dr. Randika spoke about, the research that they do needs to get scaled up just like any other startup company, right? It's no different to scaling up a tech company or any, you need a mini factory to sort of prove the model, because most of the time from research to, research might be 5 grams or 1 kilo. From 1 kilo to 1,000 kilos or to 10,000 kilos, whole thing can change. And then even at, 10 tons, which is about 10,000 kilos, it's not meaningful. Right? You need to build facilities of 100,000 tons, 1 million tons, which, if you take the textile industry, a big polyester plant is $600-700 million, right? Which might be even too big for Sri Lanka. So these are kind of the barriers that are there to scale a research at a university all the way to a big plant, but also we need regulation like EPR and our consumers in those regions and brands to also want to pay a higher price, but also if you look at a brand, they need to look at their consumers, right? the world is going through such a volatile time. There's inflation, pricing pressure, tariffs, all that happening. So, those are not really helping sustainability journey. But if you look at circularity, I mean, even as MAS, if you just type on the internet, we have made 2 investments in, startups, and those startups were founded from university research ideas. It took 8 to 10 years for them to grow and find financing, and it's a multi-stakeholder approach, right? You can't just have a manufacturer. You need a brand, you need financing. Financing might not be traditional financing. You might need offtakes, Series A, Series B. It's not just, getting a loan from a bank. It's not that simple. So financing really is that underlying element to scaling up circularity. There'll be great ideas coming out from universities. We will build all the possible networks of collecting clothes or collecting products back and build a whole ecosystem, but without financing, it's impossible to really put that into action.
Thank you very much. That's a practical situation that we all face, and with that we would like to open the floor to the audience if you have any questions. But before that, we would like to invite Professor Kottagama also to the stage, so you can direct the questions for Professor Kottagama and our panelists as well. So while we get prepared with that, so while that is getting prepared, I just want to direct, while that is happening, I just want to direct a question to Henry Kumarsena. This is something, sir, that was discussed this morning at the panel discussion, and a comment came in from the Assistant Governor of Central Bank. So that's what I was, while that is happening. So this is, okay. So while that is happening, sir, this was a discussion that came in at the morning discussion, and the comment came in was like, even if the financial institutes are willing to support or willing to finance these circular business models, one of the challenges is that the SMEs should start this initiation, because the initiation should come from the SMEs. Generally, now any financial institutions, they fund this green energy, solar energy, because that is in their agenda and they generally do. But to adopt a circular economy model from in the SME perspective, the initiation should come from the SME. The demand should come from them. But there is a gap also, because it's not always SMEs are happening. It's not happening from the SMEs end, because sometimes they need a little push for them to adopt this circularity. So what is your opinion on this? Like, how can we do this, or how can these SMEs take those initiatives, or rather how can take that initiation, and or else how can they value this circularity going back to the regeneration?
Well, actually, right now with the SMEs, I think the main problem is the issue of the awareness. Because conversion of the existing business models into circular economy business models is one thing. The other thing is circular economy startups. So more than circular economy startups, we can formally work on conversion of the existing businesses into circular. In that case, in the circular economy business models, you cannot work alone, like you apply cleaner production or something in the organization. You have to develop partnerships with the suppliers, with your even consumers in the B2B businesses. So then, purely the reason for doing this is financial benefits. So because you can change your business model into more sustainable. When you say more sustainable, more profitable, more environmental friendly and socially responsible business model. For example, now as NCPC, we are working with the UNEP Eco Innovation Toolkit. So we have worked with the agri-food sector, then we have worked with the chemical products supplying to the construction sector. Now in this year we are working with the steel companies. So then to convert the existing models into circular economy business models. So therefore, we have to broaden in that case the awareness. That is very important. Thank you.
Indeed, awareness. With that, I think we can open the floor to the audience. If you have any questions, you can raise and mic will be passed on to you.
I have one. Yep. I will be referring to the post-industrial waste in apparel and textile waste. So I mean, part of circularity program in Sri Lanka, there are two things I'm highlighting. We have a circularity in Sri Lanka, but we have not identified and governed. If you go to the Pamunua, pool of circularity. If you go to a Biagam area, if you go to a Gampa area, you see a lot of people using waste product. But the EPL that we have issued to them doesn't look at the circularity side, the one governance area. The other point, most of our material either import directly or local imports. Each HS code, if you go and look, which is available now in the website, you don't find any single HS code that you can identify material which can be circular. We have a GRS product that is global recycle polyester product. We have a certification. If you can have the data that is available, what is came into the country and what we have export, and the remaining balance within our ecosystem, we don't have a mass balance. If you can do that, we can bring investor to the Sri Lanka because our mass production mostly related to either polyester, polycotton or blend of polyester. Because we are in most of our apparel companies with larger brands on the sportwear, swimwear, which is polyester, which Sri Lanka cannot afford as of now because there is no investors or as panel said. So one thing is data is missing. Other thing is we are not governed the circularity which is available in Sri Lanka. So this is something I want to highlight.
Does any of the panelists would like to come?
Sumit, are there any questions in it?
Thank you, sir. Sorry. Yeah, one thing, how we can have the governance right to the available laws. Are we having a research or towards to that? That is for the doctor. And one thing I have personally given 2 research papers to 2 universities for the brand protection goods because we don't have a way to destroy them because of the intellectual property, but we are sending to the Holcim and the Kerawala PTA, which is not fabric to yarn. We are sending that to the. So these things, how we can do a research onto the circularity and how we can improve our database towards it. I don't think we have seen any research on that. If there's any less, please.
I think if I just take on the second part, speaking for ourselves, and I'm sure the other big apparel companies, we do have a good idea of what our waste is because it's our waste. I'm not sure of what's available in Pamunua and all if they know, but I'm sure even the other apparel companies know what they buy and what's left. But coming to the branded fabric, there are lots of T2T solutions that we're also working with, and we have publicly spoken about it. The thing, like Dr. Andika said, is it's just a matter of scaling up. So I think you'll see in the next 2 or 3 years a lot of change happening in this industry because a lot of companies are scaling up all over the world. It doesn't have to be Sri Lanka because if you look at the total waste that we generate in Sri Lanka, it's really not a huge amount when you look at global waste. So that's also something to keep in mind. Yeah.
I'd like to add one point to that. So we are in the process of negotiating a global plastic treaty. Just like the climate treaty, the countries are now in the process of negotiating a plastic treaty so that we can end plastic pollution by 2040. That's a target. The final negotiations will happen in about 1.5 months' time in Geneva in August. So we, as a country, we are also preparing for that. More and more in these discussions around the Global Plastic Treaty, I see that textile waste is being brought up as a commodity, as a product that has the polymer characteristics, because it's synthetic, it's plastic. And I don't think, maybe I'm wrong, I don't think there have been any studies in Sri Lanka looking at the reuse, repurpose, repair side of textile waste. Maybe I'm wrong. If anyone knows such a study, please do enlighten me. But that's a really good, when you kind of raised that point, I was thinking, no one has done a study like this. Maybe that's a really good study that we need to do. Because this is not a new thing. We have been wearing our sisters and our, this is a very, very, that's in our blood. We don't just throw away our clothes. It goes from generation to generation. So that's a really good research idea. Let me think about that, and maybe we can do a really good study on that. And on the other side, about the materials that's coming into the country, there are studies conducted for plastics as a spectrum, like a material flow analysis study. But I don't know whether textile waste or textile materials are considered within that. If not, that's another area that we can look into. Thank you.
So if I add something, in fact, textile OCUTs, about 28,000 tons are generated per month in Sri Lanka, out of which about 1,500 tons are moving to the co-processing. But from regulatory point of view, we can release some barriers, such as there are some restrictions in moving the, let's say, when you import under BOI license, so then even waste you cannot move. You have to obey the BOI license, so we can release for the waste in that way. But on the other hand, some brand restrictions are also there, because some products you cannot send for the other options other than co-processing, or as you said, for the waste to energy. So then I think those areas from both brand perspective as well as from the regulatory perspective, yes, we have to do something to release it, then actually corporate sector, private sector should act on the solutions. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And are there any questions? I would like to request the audience to limit the questions to have very to-the-point questions so that we can accommodate as many as possible with the interest of time. Yes, please go ahead.
Can I ask? My question may be related to engineer Marasena. Now, I believe that when you think about startups, SME startups, I think there are quite a few of cross-section of people are already into secondary economic products. I can look into commercial bank also. They are going into manufacturing slippers with discarded denim trousers and so forth. And likewise, there are quite a lot of things are happening. But my personal experience with them is they lack the knowledge of go-to-market strategies. And that is a major issue. Now in Sri Lanka, what always happens is, if there's a demand pull situation, automatically industries will start. I think that facilitation role is not happening to the level that is needed here. I believe that needs to be, I don't have any idea on this regard. So if you can create that business model or the environment, I think it's going to catalyze to where we want to go in time. All the best.
Thank you. I think such as startups, I have read Dr. Andika's papers also about this, some startups for the textile and other waste, etc. That's true. Actually, yeah, that's an existing problem. So basically, when you create a market for the startups, for the circular products. Again, we must look at the economics. So consumer in a developing market, developing country will not buy at a higher price than the price, average price in the market for a circular product. What I mean is, if the circular product or green product can be supplied at the same price as the other products, then of course consumers are there to become environment friendly and to buy those products. Then one of the main problem is for the startups, our reverse logistics are very costly. Let's say when you are sourcing the waste from the products, then those are becoming more expensive than virgin, which we can import. And so therefore such a system has some problems. So that's why you cannot afford at a competitive price to the market. Unless you can supply at a competitive price, your market will be limited to a particular segment, so high-end market. So that is not sufficient for the survival. So therefore, then actually startups should be promoted in reverse logistics components as well. So therefore those has to be integrated together. So those things are the things that should be done with the policy framework actually. So therefore it cannot be sorted as one single problem, but then actually that so-called infrastructure for that one has to come out in the country.
So in that case, are you implying, is it a no-go direction?
Sorry?
In that case, are you implying, is it a no-go direction? People get into circular economic industries?
Not really. Actually, yeah. So then we have to look at the resource base. When you start the businesses, so then if the resource base is there for us, I mean waste-based resources are used in these industries, then how can you source them? So actually, now for example, if you go by plastic recycling, PET bottles even, so then what is happening is actually PET bottles returning percentage is only 20% for recycling from PET bottles. The simple reason now, you know, the reverse logistics supply companies cannot make profits through this supply. So therefore, actually, if your business as a startup is based on some waste which are available in abundant quantities, virtually you can supply at a very low price, then of course you can succeed. Otherwise, then it is difficult for the survival. So therefore, any startup, it is good that they become environmentally conscious, but they have to look at the economics as well.
But I just want to add one more angle to it, which from your question also I gather most people don't think about. It can be sustainable, but it needs to be a good product. It needs to be comfortable. It needs to be at the right price. It can't just work because it's sustainable. So, you know, you have to really keep that in mind. There are so many products out there which are very sustainable but not functional at all. For example, you might have the most comfortable t-shirt, but if that absorbs more sweat and water than a normal t-shirt, no one will buy it. So you have to really think of that aspect.
Thank you.
So, thank you very much for the panel's expertise. I'm Camelia Bucatari. I'm representing FAO for the Circular in Agri-Food Economy project, supported by the Global Gateway. I would like to thank you for your thoughts because it confirms also our approach in this case, because what we are going to do, for instance, in the project is to identify ready-made solutions ready for markets, and we are going to support that with business development, so that they can reach out towards the consumers, towards the market with a business plan. What we have noticed, and I would like your thinking about this, is the level of financial literacy of these solutions that may be ready for markets, it's quite low. And I was wondering whether you have some solutions that we can consider on how to increase their level of being aware of what are the financial criteria that these ideas that are ready to be marketed are in need of, so that banks are ready to actually support them. But these concepts of financial literacy need to be considered by them as they start to work on the idea, obviously because of all the requirements. So yes, your inputs on this would be appreciated, because we are going to work with the businesses, and that would be a great help for us to actually support. Thank you.
This is, I don't know whether this is the perfect answer, but I know that there are many bankers here, so I'm going to go ahead and tell this. The answer to your question, have this same session with the SME sector. Speak to them directly, ask them what they need to make their businesses more green and how can they support them. Banks can implement those later someday if it's not practical within their portfolio, but this discussion we are having now, we need to have with the SME sector. Mr. Samantha, I don't know exactly the percentage, but if I'm correct, I think in Sri Lanka, roughly 60% or more is actually MSME sector, and they can be the change makers. I am a strong believer of small is beautiful, so we need to start, like, even the little steps are really important. Have this same discussion with the MSME sector directly. That's my simple answer.
So, in fact, as the National Innovation Center, we have not worked on this topic with the startup businesses, but when we go by eco-innovation for the existing businesses to convert into environment friendly, so that then we work out the economics of the new model, so that because if that model is not financially sustainable, then we cannot suggest that onto the company. So because that is very much essential, because the new changes, new implementation should be economically viable for the business to exist. But for the startups, we have not done any work. But that's an important scope as you highlighted, so then I think especially banks can take some initiatives in future, I guess. It's an important area. Thank you.
Thank you. And in the interest of time, can we, are there any other questions? We can accommodate another question maybe. All right.
Good afternoon. Thank you for the insightful conversation. I come from Bhutan. Bhutan is a landlocked country, as some of you know. We grew up worshipping mountains because mountains are all around us. There's other thing that we worship, which is oceans. And the nearest ocean to us is 1,000 kilometers away. In fact, most of the Bhutanese would never have seen oceans in their life. And I'm fortunate I'm here nearby an ocean. So first thing I did, by the way, I work in an intergovernmental organization. Presently, we have a project on plastic waste management. So first thing when I arrived Colombo was to go nearby the ocean. And now because of my work, my eyes are trained to look into plastics. And unfortunately, I see plastic all over, on the beaches, on the surface, inside. When you go for snorkeling, there are plastics as well. The coral reefs are all white. And my romantic view, my spiritual view of the ocean immediately collapsed. And so if you look into some of the statistics for Sri Lanka, only 3% is recycled. Sri Lanka is one of the top 5 leaking plastic into the oceans. But then what is the problem? What is the problem? Is it the political will? And when I discuss this matter with the senior bureaucrats and politicians, even in the South Asia region, it is not political will. There is a lot of political will. If there was no political will, Sri Lanka would not have come out with 9 robust regulations. And I think, is it lack of research? I mean, we have all the know-hows about what to do with the plastic. And I'm not refuting the need for research. I mean, research would give us new knowledge. But not to act because there is no research is no excuse. So what seems to be the problem, perhaps what the professor said, attitude. But then to wait for an attitude change, even Lord Buddha could not change the attitude. So that would be a costly, risky wait for us. I think it is enforcement and investment. And I really appreciate the conversation around SMEs and private sector and bank. We have funded a lot of projects on SMEs. And I think the solution really lies in localized solutions where SMEs are involved, where communities are involved. The challenge really is for all of us to see how that can be scaled up into a significant scale that we all can appreciate. So I don't know whether this is a question. If you want to react, maybe the moderators are already standing there. Maybe no reaction from you. But it is just by way of my sentiment coming from the mountains up there. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Can I quickly answer that? Because I need to do a little correction. First of all, on behalf of my people, our Sri Lankan people, I'm really sorry that our oceans kind of, disappointed you, your sacred view of the ocean. Trust me, there are beautiful oceans around Sri Lanka, and if you are in Sri Lanka, please do visit them as well. But yes, we pollute our coastal areas. The correction that I want to make is that we are not the top number 5 in ocean pollution. That was due to a data error made by that research team. But irrespective of that, I'm telling you, we are not number 5. We can be happy about that. But see, the experience is that we are polluting our oceans. Simple as that. Thank you.
Thank you very much, and I think we can wrap up the session. I would like to go around the panelists. Like, is there a key takeaway message or a message to the audience that you would like to, one final thought that you would like to give to the audience? So we would start with Professor Kotagama. One final thought to our audience.
Thank you. Thank you. I think my final thought is what was expressed is at the end of the day, it's economics. As long as you're slaves to the economy, you're going to have this problem.
Thank you, sir, and Engineer Kumarasena, sir.
When we think about the circulation, we have to address 2 key points in the chain, C and D. One thing is the customer, consumer. The other point is the designer. Because those 2 are the 2 points of control, then we have to give priority and build up the capacity and awareness for those 2 groups. Thank you.
Over to you, Dr. Nantika.
As a researcher, I think I'm going to highlight the importance of data. As I mentioned earlier, what we don't measure, we won't be able to manage. So data is important.
I think they mentioned all the points, but just to wrap it up, I think it's really, to what the engineer said, it's about having a good product, right? Circularity alone won't sell it. You need a good product that is sustainable.
Indeed, and thank you very much to all of us panelists for bringing such a diverse ideas over the circular economy principles or circularity in general, but we could understand that circularity is not just one-dimensional. It cuts across various sectors, and it's like a multi-sectoral thing that we have to work together in achieving. We are doing some amazing work already, but let's push it towards a scalable study and a practically applicable one. So with that, I think we can wind up the panel discussion, and controls back to you.